I am looking at the subject of what I'm studying on YouTube. Who is dominating the world? And my feedback to also see, do I belong anywhere? Don't think so, because there's no common ground with the saints versus the sinners, unfortunately. And it's matching the holy book of the book of Acts and the ancient Romans and Europeans who were not true Christians versus the Europeans who were Christians. So I'm looking at that subject matter and relevant to today with the splitting people apart, making a division via the bad angel versus the good angel. And so they've all been separated and divided through the category of those of us who are going to listen to the saints and Christians, and we're being burnt out as a result of constant abuse. Then there is NATO and the European Union. And then there is United Kingdom through Brexit out of the European Union. Then there is Brexit. No, I already mentioned Brexit. The fourth one is BRICS, where many nations have joined, particularly Russia, the USSR, United States of what they call Russia. So they're divided into four sections. And I'm looking at that to say, do I belong anywhere there? And the answer is no. Because even the saint category of being burnt out is unique, because we don't overlook the details. Since the devil's in the details, saints also have to be in the detail. And so even the saints are allocated by God in the detail and the bigger picture, whereas other saints who are more basic or primitive are looking at one or the other, not both. So I'm trying to look at both on a very serious perspective. Some will be persuaded according to the Bible by what I have said in the witness of the Holy Spirit versus the wet whore, who is basically the center of attention, showing off but making no difference, or the wet whore who is oversexed and overfed, very emotional, and who is also either showing off, or the other thing is that she is doing through government is attention seeking as a parasitic behavior. So they use the internet to find out how the saints are getting the attention. They steal that through parasitic antisocial behavior. Even my clothing, the color of my dress or hairstyle, so that they could be attention seeking through parasitic antisocial behavior. It doesn't belong to them. They were not slaves, so they don't know what they're talking about. And so they would steal that attention to glorify the rebel angel, the bad angel, which is parasitic. And it's mainly coming from the left government and the right, but mainly the left. So where this situation of NATO and European Union and or United Kingdom and Brexit Union, or any other union that's going to be made in the future, split in half, how they're doing exactly the same thing through the dominant left government. It's not the right government, some of them are acting as the left. Others are acting as the right, and they're not. And so it's their attempt to confuse or to trick. And therefore, they have all refused to believe what God wants them to do and failed to reach an agreement, because their way is making money, fortune and fame. It's not about faith, and it's not about living for God as a Christian nation, or any background that proclaims to have a relationship with God, regardless of what that is called. And so they are going to, according to the Holy Spirit witness, start to leave and block and or suppress the truth even further, as they have failed to reach an agreement among themselves. They're arguing in the aspect of law. So, for example, when anything in the prospect of Brexit or any other authority that's going to rule in the future, such as maybe CEO, in opposition to the American FBI, have democracy, it then becomes a debt. It becomes a false democracy because they've broken the law, or they have ignored the law that has lasted for hundreds of years through Europe, through the fact that England was part of the European Union. And even though they have left the European Union and now have Brexit, what makes it so wrong for them to break the law through Brexit and through BRICS, through this new world system, global system, CEO system, Brexit system. If we don't want to call it Brexit, we can call it a CEO system. In conclusion, it's still a leftist. It's a left-wing politics. So Brexit, CEO, and BRICS, they're all sort of doing the same thing, even though they're in different countries for BRICS. And England, United Kingdom, many of them are not part of BRICS, they're part of Brexit. It's the same type of principle, and I don't think it's a coincidence that it begins with the letter B. For a new financial system, a new type of money to destroy the American dollar and the English pound and make a new world empire through Brexit and through BRICS, and have their own leaders that they have selected. And they're very similar, Brexit and BRICS, because it's one big party and you're not in it being poor. It's an imperial party. So therefore, it's a false democracy. And this is me, through God witnessing, causing a lot of argument, not only through me, but the fact that they're breaking the law. And how are they breaking the law? For example, both Brexit and BRICS are looking to enslave the poor people, remove the benefit system. In America, we're translating that as a welfare system, so they have more money for weapons and wars. And so the bank, so there you go, there's letter B again. So Israel rules the banks, other leaders rule BRICS, other leaders rule Brexit, all with a B, B, which is another definition for New World Order. So that it is for the rich class only and to eliminate the poor. And so where does NATO... So this is how NATO is being punished, because NATO wants to have a bit of all of it. wants to be part of all of it, and at the same time is being rejected and is doing the rejection. So because of the matters of the law. And so they're leaving the law of God and the country for money. So money is more important than the law. If you have the money, you could be an immune criminal, and it doesn't matter that you've broken the law. So that's a huge problem for the very rich in the bankers, the very rich in BRICS, and the very rich in Brexit. And I think NATO does acknowledge that, but they want to protect the younger generation in the case of presenting the younger generation in politics to be our future, which again I don't agree with. It's narcissism. It's wrong to have the children rule over the adults. Adults are responsible in this sense for our future of knowing what is happening, who is undisciplined, who is unpunished, who is breaking the law, to enslave the poor, to stop the benefit system and our eligible civil rights, to turn children into soldiers, to make it legal to have guns in every country, make it famous and popular, and make it a new fashion. And also, all of this, such as cheap labour, is slavery. So the statement that I'm looking at publicly where I'm being educated, slavery originates by colonialists and landowners who are looking at the sacred laws that they would take for themselves to glorify the bad guy, the rebel bad angel and the bad human. So the ground and the soil, how rich is the soil? All these precious metals and oil. And so they're looking at both of these materialistic things to give them credibility. So rather than be morally right, that's not important. The only thing that's important is that the money makes the world go round. We don't need the law. No one needs the law if we're immune criminals within Brexit, if we're immune criminals within BRICS, and if we're immune criminals within the banking system. Who would need the law? So they're outlaws. They're the ones who are outcast, rich outcasts, who are destroying the poor people who are outcast. And these are gods with a small g. So I'm specifically looking at human gods with a small g, and what God with a big G is saying against these supremacists. They refuse to listen. They refuse to understand. They will never perceive because they're dull. They will block their ears, shut their eyes tight so that they will not see poverty, and they will not pardon somebody who had been victimized, because they don't want to receive help. They only want to harm. And so, arguing very vigorously according to the past times, refusing to do God's will and refusing to allow God to show what greatness means through God's plan and purpose. They've implemented their own plans and purposes. And so, for example, they have imposed that all the poor people who are not working are targeted to be labelled as the woke. That's a new thing that they're planning to do in the future, to make everything that I've done as spam, as the bit of ham in the tin that has no nutrients. and to devalue the poor people even more through Agenda 21 and burn out the saints. So the witches and the wizards and the sinners, that's what they are, magicians, are using new technology to burn out the saints, when in fact it should be the other way around. It should be them that are burnt out, because these gods, this is the gods. This is our corrupt government with a small g. It's appalling. So I'm trying to look at what they're doing in opposition to God's will. And I've marked it well in my Bible, in connection to the Holy Book of Acts and Saint Paul. His life was turned upside down by God's. He was also in a storm and shipwrecked, meant in the wreckage, lots of pieces of the ship, and everybody wanted to kill the prisoners that Saint had released, and they wanted to swim to escape. How only one saint survived, and his closest friends and allies. So it is not true that those who are closest to us hurt us the most. It depends on the quality of that relationship and trustworthiness and honesty. So those who are closest to St. Paul, which is relevant today, this was written 2,000 years ago, it's the same principle of connecting the human nature, who can be trusted and who has a longing to keep the law and sovereignty in every nation, in order for them to be worthy to be called a holy type of globalist, a holy type of politician that will, in every case, present not man-made law, but mainly God's law. So the saints are having burnout as a result, because no one cares nowadays about God's laws. They didn't 2,000 years ago. How much worse it is today. They've made man-made laws. So, for example, I have said yes to this, and they agree with the saints. Only like 2 out of 10%. And so open for experimental trial and error for any interventions, any experiment, in order for you to find out the error, trial and error, so you can put it right. So we agreed on that. That is the secular world listening to the saints and God Almighty. Very few agreements. And the dollar is destined to be destroyed because it has stolen a lot of valuable things from other nations, their land, their people being wiped out through killing of people from other nations. And they call themselves the world police, and they've killed many nations, many different nationalities, which is human life is valuable. So this is the reason, this is the God's condemnation that we all agree on, where the dollar is being reduced in doing God's will. And the value of the pound is being reduced because of the fact that they've done something very similar or worse as USA, UK. And so there is panic about the future money, what type of money we will have, that they're going digital for the new generation. And what they call it, the 5th generation or something in that prospect. But again, it's the root of all evil. When you love money more than the Creator God, that is again an attempt on everybody's life. It's another type of genocide caused by digital money and relying on the internet. The government is making it compulsory, do everything online. There is nothing sacred. There is nothing secret. There is nothing that you can stash up and save that the government doesn't know. So in the future, the money will be useless. It says people will throw money on the streets and be useless. Unfortunately, because of too much corruption, and they refuse to believe that convenience can be there for the poor and the rich, not only the rich. And so their authority and their kingship, in this case, has been perverted. It's a pervert and obscurance of justice. And so further on, reading in my Bible, so I've mentioned the things that we agree on, now the things that we do not agree on. So do not. Will God, there is one question though that I don't know. Will God leave NATO for it to be punished and then return? I don't know the answer to that question. And so now I'm going to all the do nots. Do not privatize businesses, small or big businesses, and banks and other systems only because they've privatized and liquidized too much. Again, it's a big club and you're not in it. If you can't call it a cult, we can call it a club. Do not meddle with the British passport, changing it to blue when it was red because of Brexit. Do not meddle in other people's governments when it's none of your business. Do not stop civil rights and privacy laws. And do not allow kids to rule. Do not remove the ancient boundary lines, borders, roads, ancestral things that they have undug as tomb raiders without acknowledging how it is sacred. Do not marry unequally yoked and other races unless you have an advanced relationship with the Creator. Even then it's extremely detailed and extremely sensitive case. Even those who are an advanced level in a relationship with God, constantly praying. Do not mix LGBTQ, gay and lesbian society, in with the disabled. So these are all the do nots that many have ignored and will refuse to be listen to it, regardless of what their personality is, if it's a cat-dog soul cycle or dog-cat soul cycle, because they're gods. In other words, they have that curse on them, God's curse on them. Again, their ears, their eyes, and their hearts. We cannot force anyone to be converted, or we cannot force anyone to say, Dr. God is here, Dr. God can make you better and make you sane while you're insane. Indeed, that is God's intention, to have holy leaders and sovereignty in every season, in every time, morning, afternoon, evening. But they refuse to listen. They refuse to allow God to help and heal. Because they make more money out of war, confusion, chaos, crisis. So it doesn't make any sense for them to want to listen. So they've become more vigorous, more a negative type of opportunist, to make it even more difficult for people who already have too many bills to have more expense, to get more outgoings rather than incomings. And so it affects the income. And so what they're doing very obviously, I've made note in what they're doing, their tactics to cause trouble. I have to find it. And it's very interesting because I've looked at the letter B, and now I'm looking at the letter I for indigo. How they're immune for crime. And creating, I think that I have to stop saying but this is unfiltered and casual speech presentation, so I'm excused. And I found what I was looking for. How they make themselves immune as immune criminals. With the letter I that I've made note here. If I can find it, it's a bit soggy. I think I spilled some water on it or something. Yeah. And I wrote it down. Here we go. It's inside my plastic thing, the paper. So they have disempowered us to make us feel powerless through over-weaponizing everything and overdoing it. So this is where Christ was crucified by the authorities, facing their control, who controls the money through colonialists or capitalism, whether I live or not. So I have recognized where my enemy is actually where my friends are. So where my enemy is where my friends are also. And I've identified who they are, and I can't say who they are because if I do, it will be death threatening for me to say it. So I have recognized it, and I cannot say it. And I think that they're getting the sensitivity, they're getting the gist, they're getting that intuition, which is very wicked and wrong, for doing wrong. And it's very tricky because where my friends are is also where my enemy is. And it's a type of an authoritative supervisor that's doing this, which is an immune criminal. On both the conservative side and on the liberal side. So they want, here's the letter I, ideal manufacturing and manuscripts, and they want this evil type of perfectionism, a monumental monster. To say that also who is unemployed, they've chosen to be unemployed because they get more money on the benefit system compared to people who are surviving and they cannot earn a living because they're surviving. And so to hire, they can't, there's jobs to hire, but no one wants the jobs. So this is actually happening now because of their hatred towards legal migrants in the United Kingdom or America. And that's how they've weaponized the welfare system and state benefits from their jealousy and envy that we're trying to recuperate and survive. They don't want us to survive, they don't want us to exist, and they don't want us to recover from abuse in every direction. So the enemy is too large, it knows too much in every direction. And they're saying that I'm like Victoria and my enemy is like the Bloody Mary, or Queen Victoria's sister or stepsister, which is a lot of nonsense. It's some type of fantasy they've got going on. So they're again, here comes the letter I, invisibility, imposing some type of an investment through a created crisis and lies, interpretation to misinterpret and to cancel culture. So I want to cancel their culture, they want to cancel my culture. I want to commit genocide against them, they want to commit genocide against me. So it is it's brutal. And I can't be called woke and I can't be called broke. Even if I was broke, I would still be more intelligent to survive compared to them. Then there is the claim that they're infinitive, eternal, because of the investment they've got. And the initiative or intuition that they've got, which is a copy to impersonate the saints who are Satan's. And they align with the interest of the owner versus the others who are not owners. So they're also looking at a social scoring in the future to say it's a social behavior, it's if something has to be repaired in your home through social housing, it's automatically your fault. You can't communicate properly, or you're damaging the property. And so all of these concerns is again targeting the poorest who are not homeowners. So it's the homeowners versus the others. Horror. Is there anything else that they've used with the letter I? So I've said in only improvement for homeowners, no improvement for anyone else who's in social housing. So all this is a crime. It's a hate crime. So it's like those who have versus those who have nots. And this has not been resolved. And no one wants to understand about having higher standards for both. To find well-being and recovery for the older generation or those who are sick, who have pre-existing medical conditions. So therefore, it becomes antisocial, a hate crime, and civil unrest. It becomes a third world nation, a third party. It becomes a different power for negativity, not a difference for positivity. It becomes self-explanatory to say that my truth is based on my suffering. Your truth, in opposition as a rival, is based on a lie or a purchase of your truth. So this affects everybody in the community to say that only their actions matter, only their recovery matters, only their lives matter, because they're the working class. Those who are not the working class, we don't matter. We're less than humans. We're demoralized, dehumanized, desensitized. And we're introduced to slavery, which is therefore a false democracy. So that's my argument. So returning to the subject of what the big leaders are doing, the very, very, very rich up top, is revealed how they're immune from crime, hate crime, and I've put 7 points I marked. They want to rewrite history through arrogant idealism. That's their motivation. In other words, they would target children with new technologies and AI and making idols through this ideal, perfect, new modern world. Idols are as bad as LGBTQ, gay and lesbian, or sexualizing children, which is a child abuse. And so idolizing games and things of that nature on Facebook, targeting children and saying that the children are our future, is very bad because they acknowledge the dangers of it. However, they're not sorry. They're not humbled. So it's extremely dangerous what they've done to for the older generation who is sick and poor. They only make it secure, protected to use the internet for the younger generation while they brainwash them, which is child abuse. And that's how they're motivated. As if I hadn't noticed. Number 2, reverse psychology, to say that only the working class and the richer, those who are not fat and ugly, who are not sick, only they can have a population and more babies so that then they can reverse the decline of the population, of having children. For what? For the whore, the bitch and the bastard, to have their families increase while you kidnap my family? You son of a bitch and bastard. Number 3, which is domestic terrorism. Oh, reverse the decline of our population, says the domestic terrorist who is implementing these new policies to be immune to criminals. Number 3, obviously compare me to a whore, to the adulteress. So if I was, in other words, still on point 2, if I was an adulterer, I would be better off according to this devilish system that immunes these criminals. Up there, up top. Number 3, the big fat cat. And it happens to be the cat-dog personality mental insane disorder, but it's a bit of both. Either way, it's a human god curse. What they do as gods with a small g, to make a hindrance and harassment and every type of hell against the saints and decent, hard-working wage earners, and also the decent poor people who can't help being sick, and that they are blocked from receiving the medication to be treated. They only cover the evil doctors and nurses who are wicked and evil, under the guise of professionalism. So you expect to go to a doctor to get a cure, not to be helped, not to be harmed. Finally get to point 3, they launch trouble. Point number 4, they buy time to provoke through imperialism. I've mentioned the letter I there. Self-righteousness as supremacists, either black or white supremacist. And this is how they're immune from crime. Number 5, in other words, anyone who's immune from crime is a god with a small g, is a human god. Number 5, the onslaught of making the poor pay for the rich and turning us into slaves through low income. Number 6, cannot afford medication, cannot afford food and clothes and all, and social and all of this. Number 6, they retaliate, they wait, which is their war cushion, and delay for the longest time until they find when you are the weakest, they attack you the most, they kick you while you're down. So this is why they delay and wait to kick you while you're down. Bad opportunity, bad, not good opportunity. And they prolong conflict for oil or for natural resources. They're saying that resources are more important than having children. It's both. Both are important, not one or the other. They want us to give up our homes, give up our children, and be arrested by those who are control freaks, who controls the money through colonialism and capitalism, in every war. So the war in Israel, money or for the weapons, and the war in Ukraine. And so these doctrines and teachings is there for the Gentiles, which doesn't give us good news. It gives us bad news, which is composing like some type of music or some type of film that practically enables immune criminals to rewrite our history, cancel culture, and say one or not the other, to make an imbalance, to make such imbalance where nothing is practical then. Everything is about hate crime, war, civil unrest, money in the bank, what resources you have, who you know, and you're not given a chance to get to know anybody, depending on what political candidate you support. If you are brave enough to contact the police or fire brigade, if you are brave enough to ask for a food bank if you're starving from the government, and I've only done 4 in more than 45 years plus, food banks. If you were brave enough to have recommendation from the government, if you're brave enough to speak truth to power and corrupt politicians and corrupt government for being imprisoned through injustice, if you're brave enough never to exaggerate and tell the truth, and yet they've stolen the very word from the saints for the show-offs, I've marked it well, and or, if not show-offs, attention seekers, parasite. It's not your child, it's not your land, it's not your clothing. Thank God I have invisible clothing. Thank God I have children in heaven I have never seen. Thank God I have never had an abortion. Thank God I have never had a miscarriage. Thank God that God will help me to be stronger in my 50s and my 60s in the future. Even if they kill my body, I'm still alive in the spiritual body. Thank God that God has given me a new life after they've destroyed so much and made me uncertain, unsure of what I'm doing by constant lies and constant abuse. So I like authentic people. I like people that love the law and civil rights movements. I don't like people that make protests on the street. I like people who make protests with communication and diplomacy. I like people who uphold the law and deal with criminals rather than blame the victims for the criminals. I like people that have a little bit of a tendency to accept a dare, not as a daredevil, but to have bravery. In most cases, bravery is dumb. However, it's never done when it's done with God, who enables us to have courage. It's profound, according to the Bible. So it's not just for pastors and preachers and priestesses. It's my attributing to the Christian society to detangle things. Sometimes I have to make a granny's knot as a rope, not for suicide, but for help out of the storm. Other times I have to detangle it. It depends on the situation in the latest movement. What's the latest movement? That they trick and say, go far right, because far right is against LGBT and they will help you. But at the same time, they idolize things too much. Everything is an idol, which is as wicked to follow their guidelines, how they can separate the disabled from LGBT in the left government. And at the same time, they're practicing false democracy by continuing to idolize money, bank, landowners, and what money can buy for the technology. So these are not the disciples of the olden days for third world nations and or for the rich nations. To say that it's a destruction of truth seekers, it's a destruction of diplomacy. It's a destruction of adults who are keeping responsibilities. It's a destruction of anyone who is disabled or crippled that wants to have a little bit of exercise to find an oiled penis, an oiled vagina, a condom, nuclear waste on the path. It's a destruction of every type of mysticism and the occult, where they're worshipping nature, the creatures rather than the creator. So it's total destruction of our human society because of political correctness and a bit here and a bit there of a tendency to idolize or, which is both as bad as each other, the LGBTQ. So move right if you're against LGBTQ, but come away from the right, go to the left if you are against the total idle bad perfectionism from the right, move left. So a moment ago I was left, the other moment I'm right, and centre government, there's no one authentic. They all have false profiles. And after 5 years period of me being on social media, it's gotten worse. We're being captured by slave masters simply for using social media. Oh, you're not allowed to have anything creative. It's for the children only. And so that's how they're converting children, brainwashing children in through new technology, AI, addressing the sick and the disabled and the parents who are poor and unable to work as individuals and independent people as prisoners of the system, political prisoners. And it's not exaggeration. I'm not exaggerating. It's even worse than fiction. It's even worse than what I've just described. Like I said, there's no one authentic. There's no one genuine. They only want to invade, fight, and cause terrible circulation of gossip, rumors, rather than have the circulation in my veins for my heart to pump and exist and remain alive. These crooked criminals circulate the wrong things in every bad manner of speaking. Everything that they've done, their recommendations, their notes how to deal with prisoners versus the criminals. For a piece of information, they would fight as cats and dogs so that they could either cancel culture or they would add a culture that never existed as if it did exist for commercial purposes. And to me, this is the same as robbery and rape, revealed in the Bible through Saint Paul, the Apostle of Christ. And I say, I'm not here to convert anybody or convince anyone or to change somebody's mind. I am here to say the cutting edge, how I had been cured, the course of the mystery of Satan versus the mystery of saints. Me having the best citizenship suddenly have my home turned upside down for the worst citizenships because I cannot afford to take children's social services to court, sue them to receive my compensation, and provide my daughter unconditional love. I'm not allowed. They would either say I smothered her, given her too much no freedom, or given her too much of freedom. So you can't win with these court cases, and it's pointless to take children's social services to court or any other authority, since they will all, no matter how much money I pay, they will always win in the sense of them cutting me down, henceforth them having more money than me. So this is what the court cases are about today. Who has more money to win the court case? And it has nothing to do with social. It has nothing to do with who you know, politician-wise, or the chronological effect of any other holy book that they possibly have, or legal book that they have. That's nothing to do with it. It's what evidence you have, what people you know, has nothing to do with it to defend and protect the woman from domestic abuse and violence, the woman who had their children removed from their care because of their disability, or any other smelly, stinky sinners' accusations. And anything that's left over of a lone survivor is a cruel end of murder and death threats. So men are crying as babies in the care of all the Barbies who hate babies. And God, she's dressed in pink, so she's so bloody immature. And yet they have, through colonialism, capitalism, and through what's it called, communism, all endorse this blonde bimbo who is turning everybody into a slave in the defense of money and what money can buy. Buy you a citizenship, buy you a passport, buy your children, sell your mother sell your mother in exchange of a camel. What else can you buy? And so the root of money, in closing this video, is evil. Not if you love and respect and cherish the truth as truth seekers. If that truth can be animated in film, in music, if it's there to praise God in persecution, in poverty, in exchange for influencing our culture for centuries, just like the Bible did in the oldest Christians that ever existed. They resolved the problem of cancel culture. And it was more than a religion, it was a relationship with God, and God being a witness to them, and they were the witness to God. It was nothing to do with domination, total knowledge, showing off, attention-seeking, parasite behavior. That didn't exist in them days. So, however, when they did travel to places such as Sodom and Gomorrah, that did exist, the same type of crime. As missionaries, they did travel around the world as first Christians. And they made a decision to the point of protecting human kindness, not human unkindness, and not humiliating the innocent. So again, this is how I close my video. On that note, to find order, God is a God of order, not mess. Or they've taken that to Batman, batshit, and COVID-19. Was it Batman it will not work with mess? So again, this idol, this pop idol or celebrity can be evil, could be used for evil or good. Money could be used for evil or good. It depends of knowing God and God's world in love versus knowing the world in systemic abuse of these slave masters, and every possibility to turn somebody's life upside down through invisible enemy and invasion. And again, at the beginning of the video, I said something what is slavery. Is liquidizing every type of business, big or small, and banking economical systems. This is how they introduced slavery all over again within the human race. So we're back to square one, we're back to the Stone Ages. We haven't learnt anything. As a result of not defending and not obeying God and not defending the poorest through the benefit system and helping us to recover, helping us to change and turn things around. No, they only make matters worse. So this is why we have this circumstance. This is why we have the destruction of society at large. I'll close this video as Mima. I'm also known formally as Maya Maria. And I'll always be known as that, my old and new name. Middle of October 2024.